jurisprudence, but I'm stumbling on psychiatry today. Like, what the fuck? I am so tired. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and do the intro because we have so much shit to do today.
Go.
Okay, hello everybody. You are listening to The Triad, where we're spooky but sensitive. I'm Shannon.
I'm Shelby.
I'm Hannah.
Yay! Okay, announcements. I have one. Do either of you have an announcement? Actually, wait, I think I have two, technically.
Little short one, but it's not a big deal.
Okay. I'll just do mine then. So mine is, because last time I was ranting about Allison's living situation. She found a new house to live in. She's already moved in. We're good. The only thing left we have to do is get her security deposit back, but we have a plan for all that if they try to be assholes about it. So that was it for that. And then second is, I kind of realized, I actually realized this a couple days ago, but then I forgot and then mentioned it to them today. You know, when we're recording, we reference PowerPoints a lot. And I was like, no one can see those except us. So we made a publicly available folder with copies of our, Google Slides presentations. There's a link on our Instagram. It's the link in our bio on Instagram. And then I'll be putting it in the show notes from here on out. I'm not going to go back and edit all the show notes from old episodes to add it in. That's no. So starting from here forward, it will be in the show notes. But it's on our Instagram link. It's in our Instagram bio if people need it. So it's not every episode. Partially because I've been cleaning out my folder periodically because I didn't think we would ever do this. So I don't have a lot of mine. And then Shelby just doesn't make them. So
wow. Okay.
Well,
and I put in a lot of effort with today's, but that's fine.
Oof.
Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong.
Yeah.
Although I did find
but
one.
you're certainly rude.
No, I did find one.
To be rude.
No, you're totally fine. I did find one though from the St. Patrick's Day episode. So I can.
Okay, I missed that one.
Move that into the folder. Well, it wasn't in our triad folder. It was in my personal stuff.
Oh, so I literally could not have found that. Okay, I found your other. You had a couple floating around in the folder. I moved those over, but yeah. So it's not every episode.
Look, I'm not consistent with where I put things.
No, that's okay. But yeah, it's not every episode, and then going forward, it's not going to be every episode. This isn't we're gonna do a slideshow every single time. Just no.
Shelby can't be relied upon. That's what she's saying.
I don't want to put that pressure on anybody to feel like they have to make a PowerPoint if they don't have time that week. Let's phrase it that way. So
it's okay. You can call me out.
I did earlier, and you both yelled at me.
It's fine.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, so if anyone's interested, those are all there. They're obviously free. They're just copies. So, we went ahead and deleted speaker notes. So they're literally just the visuals that we use. But yeah.
Enjoy. They're, well, Shannon's are pretty professional. Hannah's have the best memes.
Yes.
And,
Thanks.
Mine are...
Your two are both good, though.
That's questionable. But
I really love that deviant art that we had going on.
Yeah, the DeviantArt theme that we were running with for a while was fun. But yeah, because I just realized
I don't know. I think today's PowerPoint is kind of fun for me.
Well, that's good. Yay. Yeah, and then I guess this is my third announcement. We're recording 3 episodes today. And then we're recording 4 episodes in one day next week. Because we
brought it upon ourselves. It's
fine.
We're
doing it on purpose because I'm moving and then going on vacation, and then Hannah wants to finish her. Are you turning it into an actual novel? Is what you're doing? You want to finish it?
Oh yeah, I have to write a fucking book this. I almost said winter. That is where I am.
This summer.
This summer.
Yeah, and then it just was going to be easier to just get a whole bunch done. So we're not going to be recording in July, and then a good chunk of August, hopefully, too. So, yeah, so the next few weeks, if we sound exhausted, that's why.
Yes.
It's because we are.
Yeah. Okay, that was all I had. So, Hannah, what was your announcement?
Oh, it's the last week of school. Woo-hoo!
Yay!
For the children that I teach.
Yeah. Yay.
Yeah, so everyone is out of their flippin' minds.
I bet.
I mean, yes.
Yeah.
Today was field day for second graders, so.
Ooh, that's fun.
R.I.P. to all the second grade teachers.
Yeah. Okay, Shelby, did you have any announcements? Drinking ski again, I keep burping.
No.
Okay. Then for my lead in to the topic, so initially I was before we decided we were recording 7 episodes in 2 weeks, this was going to be the last episode that I recorded while, of my own that we did while I was still living in Chicago. So I was like, this is going to be my last, Chicago thing. But now I'm going to have 3 episodes while I'm still living in Chicago. So this one and my next 2 are all going to be, they all took place in Chicago. Even though I am not recording in Chicago because I'm stranded at my mom's house waiting for my car to get a replacement muffler. So...
You say stranded.
I'm not really stranded. But...
I mean, you're welcome to come over and stay in my house.
I know. I'm fine. No, it's just I say stranded. I could. I'm stranded in that I cannot leave the area to go back to Chicago.
I know.
You know? Yeah. Okay, so... if you want to go to, what am I authorizing? Oh, that's Discord again. The episode 51 folder. I put my slideshow and my notes in there.
Oh. Ah! What the hell?
Literally just punch my microphone. I know I say that I do that all the time.
You say that
and I do.
literally every episode.
But I do. I have no concept of where I am spatially. So, when I'm in my car, you guys have seen me do this in the car. I'll, whack the window because I'm trying to point at something, but I forget that there's glass there. And I've, broken fingers because of this.
Oh, my goodness.
I worry about you.
Yeah. Okay, just let me know when everyone's ready, please.
I'm good.
Okay.
Just go on without me. No, I'm here. Oh, frickin' finally.
Yeah, I know.
I was gonna say, haven't you had notes for this since day one?
I haven't had notes for this.
She has been talking about this.
I've been wanting to do it.
Since day one.
I've been wanting to do it since day one, and then I just kept deciding on other topics. So this was, so we're talking about the Leopold and Loeb case, and so this was, again, this is going to be my, farewell to Chicago. Great case for that. But we're going to have 2 more after this that are Chicago related. So this is just one in a trio. Okay, so my sources today are, shockingly, Wikipedia. I have an article from the Paris Review. I have stuff from, it's homicide.northwestern.edu. So Northwestern University has this website that houses this project. It's the Chicago Historical Homicide Project. And it's fascinating. And a huge point of it is to detail police corruption. It has so many cases in it. It is so... I wish I'd known about it sooner. It's so cool. And then I got the bulk of my notes from a book called For the Thrill of It. It's by Simon Batz, and that last name is Baatz. I've read that book multiple times. So I used it for sources for this. And then I also have a Smithsonian Mag article also by Simon Batz, and it's basically just a condensed version of key points in the book. And it was just easier for me to pull some facts from that Smithsonian Mag article rather than typing it out from the book. And so I am going to first say I cut out a lot of detail in order to keep this as concise as possible, and I still ended up at 17 pages. So this is still fairly detailed, but it could have been way worse. So I tried to keep in as much interesting detail as I could, but then there were some things that I decided to cut that I'm sad that I cut, but I needed to cut it because it really wasn't relevant. So yeah, just buckle up. Okay, so first thing we are going to talk about is the a short bio for Nathan Leopold. So if you can go to the next slide, this is Nathan Leopold. Also, I'm going to be referring to both of them by their first names because their last names are so similar. I just think that'll be easier. It's easier for me, so...
Go for it.
Well, one is 3 syllables and one is 1 syllable.
Well, it's Leopold. They're both L's, and it just seems too...
All right.
For me personally, they're too similar, and I always get them mixed up. So I'm going by first names. Okay, so Nathan Leopold Jr. was born November 19th, 1904, into a wealthy German Jewish family in Chicago. I'm only mentioning that because it becomes relevant later. He had 2 older brothers named Michael and Samuel. He spent his first 11 years living on Michigan Avenue in the Loop, which is like downtown Chicago. When he was 11, his family moved to Kenwood, which is a neighborhood on the south side of Chicago, and it's the same neighborhood that the University of Chicago is in. Nathan was really happy that they had moved. In the Loop, he attended the local public school where he was bullied relentlessly. He was a really serious, studious child and was from a more affluent family than his classmates, so they picked on him a lot. They also found out he had briefly attended a girls' school, so that did not bode well for him either.
Why?
I don't know. I couldn't find an explanation for that. I think it was just that this is just my own guess. I have nothing to back this up. I'm guessing it was an emergency kind of thing where they were like, we need to get him in a school.
Yeah.
And that was the only one that had openings, but I couldn't find an explanation. I just know he briefly attended a girls' school. I don't know why.
All right.
I did try to find out, but I couldn't find out. But then after they moved to Kenwood, he was enrolled in the Harvard School for Boys, which was like a prep school, and he attended that school throughout high school. So while he was growing up, his mother was essentially an invalid. She had contracted a mysterious illness after her pregnancy with Nathan and was bedridden. This left the raising of the boys in the hands of their governess, a German woman named Matilda Vance. Her behavior was reported to be kind of erratic, although I couldn't find an explanation for what exactly that meant. More concretely and more importantly, she did have a sexual relationship with 17-year-old Samuel and 12-year-old Nathan.
Gross.
No.
Gross.
Okay, so Nathan excelled in school. He taught himself several languages and discovered an interest in ornithology, which is like bird watching, and he was a bird person, basically. And it was through ornithology that he made his few friends in primary and high school, as most of his classmates considered him to be an eccentric loner. I wonder why. He graduated high school one year.
Bird boy.
Yes. He graduated high school 1 year early, and in the summer of 1920 was preparing to enroll in the University of Chicago for the fall. And it was this summer that he became friends with Richard Loeb. So now we're going to switch over to Richard Loeb. So if you can go to the next slide. This is Richard Loeb. Also, sorry, that whole bio came from For the Thrill of It, which is that book that I've read multiple times. And then this next bio also all comes from For the Thrill of It. Most of my information comes from that book. Excuse me. So Richard Loeb was born on June 11th, 1905, which today is June 14th, so we're pretty close to his birthday. His family was really influential and well-known in Chicago at the time. So, his father was the vice president of Sears, Roebuck and Company. His mother was a prominent member of the Chicago Women's Club and was a colleague of Jane Addams, and she was a big, housing reform kind of a person. And then his uncle was a lawyer and former president of the Chicago Board of Education. So, he was responsible for what was called the Loeb Rule, which prevented teachers in the city's public school system from going on strike. So, this is the family that Richard Loeb was born into.
Woohoo!
Yeah!
I mean, that's shitty. That's a shitty law.
Yes. That was a sarcastic woohoo.
I was just thinking about teachers. Didn't really process what you said until after I had cheered, and then I was like, wait a minute, that's not good. Wait, that's bad.
Yeah. So Richard had 2 older brothers who were out of the house by the time he was 15, and he had a younger brother. Because his parents were so busy, Richard was also raised by a governess. So her name is Emily Struthers, and she was a Canadian immigrant. She was, relatively uneducated, and she considered that to be her greatest hindrance. And she kind of, took it out on Richard and forced him to be an academic overachiever. He was already, he was naturally very intelligent, but she pushed him even more. So he started high school at the age of 12. He attended the University High School, which was attached to the University of Chicago. And so this school had been started by a philosophy professor at U Chicago, and it was kind of unorthodox. It replaced the current academic method of rote memorization with an emphasis on creative problem solving and classroom cooperation. So he excelled in school, but unlike Nathan, he also had a very active social life. He was really well liked and was in a bunch of different like school clubs. But even with all of these achievements, Emily, his governess wasn't, what's the word I want? She just wasn't okay with that. Like she was striving for more. And so she decided that he was going to graduate high school 2 years early when Richard would have been 14.
Heck?
So his teachers...
Talk about a helicopter mom.
Yeah. She's not even his mom. She's a governess.
Well, yeah, but still.
No, but like you're right. Like she basically was a helicopter parent. And so his teachers strongly discouraged this plan. But she was adamant, and Richard's parents just didn't give a shit. And so they continued on with this plan. This meant that Richard had to give up all of his social activities for his sophomore year of high school, as he had to take an insane amount of classes to graduate early. He did graduate early and entered the University of Chicago at the age of 14 in fall 1919. So Richard wasn't happy about any of this. He resented Emily for like pushing this on him. He resented his parents for not giving a shit, and he resented his former classmates for being like free to progress through high school at a normal pace. And it also became
not
apparent...
really their fault, but okay.
No, but I mean, it's just one of those things. Like, he was just jealous, basically. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And again, he was 14, so like, yeah.
There's a few hormones in there.
Yeah. It became apparent pretty quickly that he wasn't ready for college because he was only 14. His first year at U Chicago resulted in pretty mediocre grades, especially for someone who had previously excelled academically. Additionally, in summer 1920, Richard's parents decided that he no longer needed a governess, and Emily left the household. So this left him with essentially no supervision as a frustrated 15-year-old boy.
Oh, God.
And then
anyway, eggs.
Yeah, and then again, this was the same summer that he became friends with Nathan Leopold. So now we're going to talk about, like, their relationship leading up to the 1924-ish. So if we can go to the next slide, this is just them together. So they did know each other socially before 1920 because their families knew each other. But even then, like, it's not really clear, like, why they became friends. They were just very different people, especially when they did become friends in 1920. Nathan was studious, serious, and just insanely awkward. And then Richard was the exact opposite of all of that.
He looks really intense in this picture, and Richard looks like he's about to cry.
Yeah.
That's how they look in every picture.
Nathan is making me do things I don't want to do.
Which is interesting, because it was actually the opposite of that.
Yeah, it's just their faces.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so kind of going into that, so looking at it through like a more like modern understanding of psychology, it appears that Richard was like the leader of the two and Nathan was the follower. We are like pretty damn sure that Nathan was romantically in love with Richard, and that combined with his usual difficulty with making friends meant that he would do pretty much anything that Richard said. So Richard was a bored, angsty teenager with no supervision, so they committed a lot of petty crimes just for something to do. And so this was while they were, they were still enrolled at University of Chicago, right? And so in 1921, Richard decided he was transferring to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. And Nathan followed him out of desperation because Richard was basically his only friend and he was in love with him. So there's that. But that first semester, Nathan contracted scarlet fever and couldn't make it to campus until after the semester started. And then his mother died that October, so he went back to Chicago and stayed there until about the middle of October to be with his family after his mother passed away. While Nathan was gone, Richard had pledged to the fraternity Zeta Beta Tau and was no longer interested in being friends with Nathan. So members of the frat... What?
Fucking rude.
I know. So members of the frat had told him that he was spending too much time with Nathan, who people suspected was gay, and that would hinder him socially and would affect his membership in the fraternity. So there's that. And so, with no one to tether him at University of Michigan, I almost said Nancy. Good God. Nathan transferred back to University of Chicago.
Wow.
I mixed up Nathan and transferred, I think is what happened.
Whichever.
So he transferred back to Chicago in fall of 1922. And so this was actually a very good move for him. He was able to like move out of Richard's shadow and form his own path. He joined a bunch of different like academically geared clubs on campus and really threw himself into his studies. And he became even more active with ornithology. He would go birding, which I don't like the birding as a verb. I don't know why. That just sounds wrong. But like he would go birding all the time. And he
clearly you're not in ornithology groups.
No, I'm not.
I don't know why I said that like I am.
I was gonna say, since when
wow,
have you been an ornithologist? You just feel like being snarky to me today, don't you?
It's just, I think we all know that we're in for like a really long haul
I know.
today, and so we're all
I don't know.
full of it.
Yeah.
Shannon, I don't remember if I sent it to you, but I sent out a Snapchat at like midnight last night to a bunch of people where I was like, I had used the like shrugging emoji
I did
like 6 times in the last hour. And I was like, I need to go to bed because clearly I'm in a mood. Because I only use that emoji when I'm like, well, and so
I did get
I
that.
think
Yeah.
I think I'm still slightly in a mood.
I just saw you like 2 hours ago and you weren't in a mood.
I'm not in a mood. I don't know.
I know you're
Apparently,
not.
I'm just
I'm
sassy.
not in a mood. Sorry.
No.
Oh,
No.
man. It's okay.
We have a lot of ornithology books because my my great aunt and my sister are both very much into like anytime we travel, they're just like, I want to know every bird that I see. And like, I don't know, my sister took a class in college, something about like birds of North America. And so we just randomly send her pictures all the time. And we're like, what type of bird is this? And she's like, I don't know, Google it. I don't know desert birds. And I'm like, but you took a class. And she's like, that doesn't mean I know every bird on the planet. But anyway, so that's the only reason I know that birding is actually a word.
Yes.
But anyway.
I don't know why. It just doesn't sound like a real word to me.
No, you're right. It
you
doesn't.
know? Anyway, Nathan
Anyway,
would go
sorry,
birding all the
sassy
time.
Shelby.
No, you're fine. And yeah, so he would go birding all the time. He even had 2 papers prepared for publication for the, I guess it's it's AUK, which is a bird magazine, I guess, during his final year at U Chicago. I think it's like an academic journal about birds. I didn't look that deeply into it. And then,
AUK? Is it the Audubon?
Yes. Huh? It's
No,
just,
nothing.
okay.
Anyway, moving on.
Okay. And then I think he also made... What?
Sorry, nothing.
Okay. I think he may have also discovered a new species of warbler, so he was actually, like, really big,
that's
like, in
actually
the
cool.
ornithology community. And
Look,
so...
ornithologists are crazy.
Yeah. So he graduated from U Chicago undergrad in 1923 and planned to enroll in U Chicago's law school that fall. And so Richard had also graduated college that year from University of Michigan. He had not done well in college. He basically just partied with his frat, but even that didn't go super well. So his classmates and frat brothers noted that Richard's behavior was kind of childlike. And so this is a quote from For the Thrill of It. In conversation, he could often seem quite normal, even serious, but without any warning, he might suddenly break off a topic and talk in an irritatingly frivolous, infantile manner, end quote. So he was just, like, generally annoying to talk to.
Wait, which one is this?
This is Richard, the one on the right in that picture.
Okay, I don't know why I can't, like, if there's 2 people, my brain is like, they're the same person, and I can't separate.
This is why I'm going by their first names.
I know.
No, you're fine.
I feel like that made it harder.
Really?
It's...
Yeah, because now I can't remember which one's Leopold and which one's Loeb.
Ah, gotcha. Okay. Do you want me to say their full names every time?
No, stick with Richard and Nathan. It's because my brain doesn't process names.
Okay.
Which,
anyway,
have I ever told you?
It's for sure an us problem.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not a you problem.
Okay.
It's a me problem. Have I ever told you, this is a really quick thing, but I honestly did not know your name for like the first 3 months we were friends.
No.
Yeah, because
To be fair, I probably didn't actually introduce myself. I just told you were hanging out with us now, is basically what happened.
That's what happened to me.
Yeah.
She cornered me in the hallway in 7th grade on the first day of school, and I was the new kid. And she was like, do you want to eat lunch with me and my friends? Okay, bye.
Yeah.
So that's what happened.
Well, this is what Shannon did to me. She turned around in driver's ed and was like, yeah, you don't really talk that much, do you? And I was like,
I don't remember that at all.
You definitely said that.
Sorry, I don't remember that at all.
That sounds like a
Shannon thing. And then
Shannon
you invited
thing.
me to like the friend group, but I was like,
but
yeah. I'm not denying I did that. I'm just saying I don't remember doing that.
But yeah, so she like cornered me in the hallway, invited me to lunch, which is totally fine. Like, I appreciate it. It sounds really negative to say she cornered me. She did not. But
it's just
like,
when I do things
like every day, my mom would be like, "Oh, so like, who did you talk to today at school?" And I'd be like, well, I ate lunch with my friends again, but I don't know their names." And she was like, "Shelby, it's been 2 months," and I was like, "Yeah, well, It's been 2 months and now it's too awkward for me to ask." So, yeah. But yeah, so like for a good 3 months, I did not know your name.
That is
and
fantastic.
then I think someone, like one of our teachers said it in class or something. And I was like, Shannon, thank God someone said it. So, yeah.
I love that. Okay.
So yeah, it's definitely a me problem. I just don't retain names.
Okay.
So it's fine.
Okay. Where was I?
Anyway.
Okay. No, you're fine. One more thing with Richard and his frat brothers. So, upperclassmen were like supposed to be models like for freshmen and sophomores. Like they were supposed to be like well behaved and be good examples and all that. But his behavior eventually became so embarrassing that he was censured by his frat, and his privileges as an upperclassman were suspended. I don't know what any of that means. I just know he was really fucking annoying and embarrassing. That's all I know. He didn't really know what he wanted to do, like, with his life, so he did what a lot of millennials relate to and decided to go to grad school.
Oh, wow, sounds like us.
So...
how relatable.
Yeah, he started at U Chicago for a master's in history in fall of 1923. So they were both at University of Chicago in fall 1923, just in different, like, programs. So after they both ended up at U Chicago again, Nathan quickly fell back under Richard's influence. Remember that Nathan was more or less in love with Richard. So, you know, from his point of view, he's like, I have to keep this person happy, right? And so the way that sources describe it, Nathan and Richard were in more of a... Okay, so they did have sex with each other fairly regularly. Richard didn't seem to care one way or another about sex in general. He later said he could get along very easily without sex. And his indifference meant that he was basically like, yeah, sure, why not, when Nathan asked if they could have sex. I will get into more of their actual relationship later and how I think it hasn't been analyzed well, but we're going to get into it later. But I am only bringing this up because it does come into play later on. Okay, so they both kind of sucked as people. They're both like kind of narcissistic. A classmate of Nathan's, a classmate of Nathan's later said that, quote, Nathan was very egocentric. Practically all the time I was with him in ordinary social conversation, he attempted by any sort of ruse possible to monopolize the conversation. It didn't make any difference what was being said or what was being talked about. He always attempted to get the conversation revolving around him so he could do most of the talking. He thought his mentality was a great deal superior to the ordinary person. End quote. I feel like we all know people who do that.
What?
Yeah.
Maybe a few.
Yeah. He also had an obsession with Friedrich Nietzsche.
Well, that's not a good one to have.
No, especially his concept of the Übermensch. And so this is a quote. I'm going to explain it real quick. This is a quote, mythical superhuman who, because he was a superhuman, stood outside the law beyond any moral code that might constrain the actions of ordinary men. So basically, Nathan believed that he and Richard fell into this category. And so he believed that they were above morality, they were above the law because they were superior. And they believed that even murder was acceptable for them to commit because, quote, the only consideration that mattered was whether the act afforded the Superman pleasure. Everything else faded into insignificance, end quote. And so Richard also believed... I know. So, Richard also believed in this kind of moral superiority, but not because of Nietzsche. He actually thought Nathan's obsession with Nietzsche was really annoying. He just thought he was superior. Just because. He didn't have some philosophical backing for it. He just thought he was better than other people.
Okay, I'm probably going to ask this like 18 more times, and I apologize for that. Which one was the, like, more dominant one?
Richard.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yep. So, at least when they were together, when they were, like, not together, Nathan functioned just fine on his own. Like, he wasn't one of those kinds of people who's like, I have to be attached to somebody or else my entire life falls apart. It was only when he was with Richard. To be fair, I mean, he always thought he was superior, but it was only when he was with Richard that he became, like, this level of a follower, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, remember that Richard always wanted to commit crimes just because he wanted to, and so he and Nathan began, like, it was literally because they were bored.
Sociopathic tendencies, but okay.
Just the stupidest, I just want to do crimes for fun.
That's literally it. They were bored.
I know.
Like, so...
Like, get a hobby.
This was their hobby.
Instead of looking at the birds, why don't you just shoot the fucking birds? That's totally legal. Nobody cares.
Yes. So...
I mean, some people care.
Yes.
Not people watching the birds when you just
whip
out a gun. Oh, wait, this isn't birding?
So...
I love it.
He and Nathan began planning the quote-unquote perfect crime, a murder that they would easily get away with. So, there are a few reasons for this. Part of it was because they were asserting that perceived fact that they were immune from normal moral codes, wow, there's a lot of R's in there, and the law. So, as I've said, they've been committing petty crime for quite a while, going so far as to break into Richard's former frat house at Michigan and steal some things, and then they had also committed arson on at least one occasion. But, like, no one noticed. There was no media coverage about it, and they felt that they deserved media coverage about it, so that really pissed them off. And so the murder was an escalation of their frustration over this lack of acknowledgement of their superiority, because they were like, we got away with these crimes. How are people not recognizing that, right? And so this is a quote from the Paris Review. When asked to identify the original nucleus of the idea to kill someone, Leopold mentioned the pure love of excitement or the imaginary love of thrills, doing something different. So basically they were bored and wanted attention, and they wanted to prove that they were smart enough and great enough to get away with committing a murder. So, that's where we're going from here.
Yeah.
So, now we're going to talk about the murder. First, though, we're going to talk about their plan, because it was kind of convoluted. So...
Of course it was.
Because why wouldn't it be? So they decided they were going to drive around, kidnap a child, murder the child in the car, dump the body, and ask for ransom. Not necessarily in that order. That was just a list of things that they wanted to do. They didn't need any money. Like, they both had allowances from their very wealthy parents. They just kind of felt like they should ask for ransom since they were technically kidnapping a child. It was, I don't know. And so there were a couple obstacles.
That's what you do when you kidnap someone.
Yeah.
You're just like, I guess
I'll ask for ransom? Yeah.
I'm not a professional.
No. Yeah, and so there were a couple of obstacles in their plan. So first, they wanted to get the ransom money without being seen. And so if you can go to the next slide, slide 5, this is a write-up of the ransom note that they left. So this is the plan that they came up with. They would telephone the victim's father and instruct him to go to a drugstore on 63rd Street and Blackstone Avenue, adjacent to the local train station, to wait for a second phone call. This is the part where I put adjective and couldn't figure out what other word I needed.
Oh, goodness, Shannon.
My brain just broke. Could not figure it out. So,
she meant
the word
adjacent.
she was looking for was adjacent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I typed this out from the book, and I'd accidentally typed adjective instead of adjacent, and I was going over my notes earlier, noticed it, and I had to ask in our chat, like, what word do I want? Like, I just couldn't get past adjective. So, anyway. The victim's father had to go to a specific drugstore next to the train station to wait for another phone call. So continuing on with the quote.
So convoluted.
This is just the first chunk of it. So this subsequent phone call would arrive shortly before the train reached 63rd Street. He was to board the train, walk to the rear carriage, and look in the telegraph box for a letter that would instruct him to throw the ransom, securely wrapped in a cigar box, from the train 5 seconds after he passed the distinctive red brick water tower of the Champion Manufacturing Company. They calculated that the package would fall close to 74th Street. Nathan and Richard would be waiting at that spot, ready to grab the money and make a quick getaway. And that's just for the ransom. It's so complicated for no reason. They did do a dry... Go ahead.
Sometimes the smartest people are the stupidest criminals.
They're so dumb.
It's just, sometimes you see these crimes and you see who commits them and you're like, how stupid.
Like, the more steps you add, the more chance for a mistake to be made.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do you not know that?
Yeah.
Have you watched CSI and SVU? God.
They actually did do a dry run of this themselves, and it did work. So they, decided to go through with it because when they did it, it worked out fine.
Well, yeah, they know the plan.
Exactly. So in theory, it worked. And so this was their first obstacle, which they had solved, at least according to them. So the other obstacle was Nathan's car. So if you go to the next slide, obviously I do not have any color photos of his car, but this is a stock image photo of a similar car to what he had. So it was a very distinctive car, and they were worried that it would be recognized. So it was red, and it had nickel-plated bumpers, which really stuck out, especially in 1924. So to get around this problem, they rented a car under a fake name. So Nathan opened a bank account in the name of Morton Ballard, and they used each other as a reference to get a rental car. So Nathan opened the bank account, and then Richard went to the rental car place and said he was visiting from Peoria. I didn't put this part in, I'm just remembering. So I think he was visiting from Peoria, and he was a salesman or something. And so the people at the rental car place were like, do you have a local reference that we can call to get you a rental car? And he said, yes, call Mr. X. I don't remember the name. But then Nathan just picked up and said, oh yeah, Morton Ballard, he's great. And so they got a rental car that way.
Boy.
Yeah, and so the car that
He's not using this car for any nefarious
purposes. No. And so...
our plan is not complicated. It's fine, don't worry about it.
Yeah, the car they got was a dark green, and it was less it didn't stick out nearly as much as Nathan's car. So that was problem number 2 solved. So with both of these obstacles worked around, they began preparing for the murder itself. So the day before the kidnapping, Nathan and Richard purchased the equipment they needed for the murder. So they bought supplies separately and from multiple different stores, which I feel like a lot of people if you want to commit a perfect murder, you do exactly that. But they did catch the attention of a drugstore owner because Nathan wanted to purchase a large amount of hydrochloric acid, and that wasn't a normal thing that people bought from a drugstore. And so they still hadn't decided who exactly they were going to kidnap, but they had decided on a boy. They decided to write the ransom letter before the kidnapping, and they modeled it after a fiction story that had recently come out in a magazine. And then Nathan typed it up on an Underwood typewriter, which he had stolen from the U-Michigan frat house when they had broken in the previous winter.
Oh my god.
And so on May 21st, 1924, Nathan and Richard kidnapped 14-year-old Bobby Franks. So if you can go to the next slide, this is Bobby Franks. So Bobby was actually Richard's second cousin and lived across the street from the Loeb family home. So they knew this kid pretty well.
Idiots! Ugh!
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. So what I'm about to say is we're 99% sure this is how things happened, but we don't know 100%. So we believe Richard was in the backseat of the car and Nathan was driving. So Richard called out to Bobby and offered him a ride home from school. Bobby initially refused, saying that he was fine walking, it wasn't very far, but Richard said that he wanted to talk about the tennis game that Bobby had joined at the Loeb home the day before, so Bobby got in so that they could talk about the tennis game. And so this part, I'm going to quickly explain how he died, and then we're going to move on, but I do want to give detail because I think it's important. So they drove around the corner, and Richard bludgeoned Bobby several times with a chisel. But this didn't even knock him unconscious. So when Nathan's still driving...
Oh, God.
I'm almost done, I promise, with this part. Richard jammed a rag down Bobby's throat and taped his mouth shut. This suffocated him, and Bobby died. We're done with that part now. Okay, so Nathan then drove them all out to Indiana. So if you can go to the next slide, this is just, I found this online. I didn't make this map. It's just different points of where they did certain things for the murder. So if you look down at the very bottom, I believe it's the one on the very... It's like one of these two down on the bottom is the lake that they ended up going to. So they went to Wolf Lake. They stopped for food on the way because Nathan and Richard were hungry.
I mean, as you do.
Yeah.
When you
so
are
nonchalant,
kidnapping people.
Terrifying. Yeah. And so they had done all of this at like 5:15, 5:30 p.m. And so by the time they got out to Indiana, it was dark. And so they arrived at the lake after dark and they began disposing of the body. So to do this, they stripped Bobby's body of his clothing and poured hydrochloric acid on Bobby's face. The plan was that this would destroy his features and render him unrecognizable. I couldn't find an explanation for this next part either. So they also poured the acid on Bobby's genitals because Nathan was under the impression that police could identify someone by their genitals. I don't know why he thought that, but he did.
What kind of pervy world does he live in?
I don't know. Like... I can't remember if he...
Yes, because they keep records of
they keep records
genitals.
of that. Yeah.
Yeah, you know how when you go down to the DMV, you have to get your genitals fingerprinted?
Yeah. I think, like, his brother's friend had told him that or something. I am assuming as a joke, and then he just assumed that they weren't lying to him. I couldn't find an actual reason as to why he thought that, but he did. So they poured acid.
That's also, like, a big, like... red flag for a lot of things, right?
Yeah, it is. For like sexual abuse and things like that.
Yeah, that's what I was
trying.
You know, bad times.
They didn't sexually abuse Bobby, at least as far as we're aware. But it is still a red flag for that kind of activity. And so they then pushed his body into a drainage pipe. And they'd been carrying the body like wrapped up in a blanket, but they took the blanket back with them. So then they drove back to Chicago and they mailed the ransom letter from like a street mailbox, right? So they also burned Bobby's clothing in a fireplace in Richard's home. They tried to burn the blanket, but it was just soaked with blood because it had been underneath Bobby when they were attempting to kill him. So they hid it behind the greenhouse out of Richard's garden. And so they then went to Nathan's house where they called the Franks' residence. So they called Bobby's house to talk to his parents. They basically said, we've kidnapped your son. Wait for further instructions. We're going to get into more of that in a little bit here. And so Nathan then drove Richard home in his very distinctive red car, and Richard threw the chisel out the window. The next day, Richard and Nathan cleaned out the rental car at Nathan's home. So they were spotted by the family chauffeur, who was very confused as to why, one, Nathan was cleaning out a green car, and two, why Nathan was doing manual labor at all, because he'd never seen him do that before. And so, yes.
Oh, just the, he's never done manual labor. This is suspicious.
That's literally how it was.
I've never seen this little twerp lift his...
lift a finger for anything. Yeah.
Let alone clean a green car.
Yeah. And so... they told him they'd been bootlegging, because remember, it's 1924, so it's the Prohibition. So they told him they'd been bootlegging, like, to earn some extra money. And the chauffeur was like, that makes sense. Okay, we'll move on from here then. And he didn't really question it any further at the time. And so then they began carrying out their really convoluted ransom plan. But as they were about to start carrying out this convoluted ransom plan, they saw a newspaper article that said that Bobby's body had been discovered. So, they decided to still carry out the ransom, but Mr. Franks didn't do his part of the plan. It wasn't at the drugstore, so the plan failed. So now I do want to kind of zoom out a little bit and go through all of this from the perspective of Bobby's parents. So they had noticed, obviously, that their son didn't return home from school. They did know that he had been the umpire at like a neighborhood like pickup baseball game that afternoon, and that he had left to walk home at around 5:15. And they looked everywhere for him. Bobby actually attended the Harvard School, which is the same school that Nathan had attended before college, and they looked around the campus, they looked around the neighborhood, they asked his friends. They received that first phone call from Nathan and Richard at about 10:30 that night, right before Mr. Franks came home from searching. And so Bobby's mother actually took this call. And so the first call said, quote, "This is Mr. Johnson. Your boy has been kidnapped. We have him, and you need not worry. He is safe. But don't try to trace this call. We must have money. We will let you know tomorrow what we want. We are kidnappers, and we mean business. If you refuse us what we want or try to report us to the police, we will kill the boy." Standard kidnapping call. And yes, he was already dead at this point.
Cool.
Yeah, and so the Franks did up going to the police at about 2 o'clock that morning. So about 4 hours after they got this call. Police didn't, do a whole lot, but they also found out about Bobby's death fairly quickly. So, that's not the police's fault that, you know what I mean? Yeah. And so they got the ransom letter in the mail at about 8 the next morning. It assured them that Bobby was safe and gave the convoluted ransom delivery instructions. So at about the same time that they got the letter, Bobby's body was discovered out in Indiana. So a recent immigrant named Tony Mink was returning home from a night shift and had noticed a foot sticking out of that drainage pipe. This next part is such a 1920s thing. 4 railroad workers on a hand cart happened to be going by. Oh. So Tony asked for their help pulling the body out of the drainage pipe.
God.
They noticed large wounds on his head and that there were copper-colored stains on his face and genitals because the acid did not eat away at Bobby's face. It just stained his skin. And so they carried the body to a second-hand car. And while they were doing this, one of the workers, a man named Paul Korff, looked around the scene for any of the boys.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, you can.
Was someone playing the harmonica?
I prefer to picture it as if someone was playing the harmonica because it just adds to the ambiance.
It's like a real sad, bluesy sort of mournful sound. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. So
this has been flourishing with Hannah.
Yes. So yeah, they carried the body to a second-hand cart. One of the railroad workers, a man named Paul Korff, looked around the scene to look for the boys' clothes. He didn't find any, but he did find a pair of tortoiseshell eyeglasses lying on the ground. And because it was the 1920s, he put them in his pocket, and they all took the body to the nearest police station. He did turn the glasses over to the police. So.
Well, at least he did that.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, that was the only thing that was left at the scene. So, they weren't contaminating the scene or anything. But, nowadays, it's no, why'd you do that? But, what else were the police gonna get? Plus, there was a huge chance the police would have missed it because the police in Chicago in the 20s were not operating at their best, shockingly enough. So, back at the Franks' house, they were waiting until, the right time for Mr. Franks to leave to carry out the ransom delivery because it was, a timed plan. And so the news of Bobby's disappearance had been leaked to the press, and there were several reporters waiting outside the home. One of them, a Chicago Daily News reporter named James Mulroy, badgered the family about the body of the boy found earlier in the day out near the Indiana state line. Mulroy said that the boy had been wearing glasses because there was a miscommunication, but Bobby had never worn glasses, so the family was pretty sure it wasn't Bobby. But just in case, they sent Bobby's uncle to the morgue to view the body. Obviously, it was Bobby, so the uncle called from the morgue to confirm this. And then, literally right after Mr. Franks learned that Bobby had died, Nathan and Richard called with the next set of instructions for the ransom plan. And then, obviously, Mr. Franks was in shock. He couldn't remember, details of the delivery plan. And, obviously, he learned his child had died, so why would he follow through with the ransom plan for his dead child, right? Yeah. So that was why he didn't show up, was because he already knew that Bobby was dead. So.
See, I thought, but we hadn't quite gotten there yet.
Yeah. We good?
Yes, sorry.
Okay. I was very confused.
I'm sorry. My brain is so dead today.
You're fine. Okay, so for the investigation, police initially looked at instructors at the Harvard School as suspects, but they were all cleared, which, that makes sense. But it did take several days to clear all of the suspected teachers. And then they just had to, like, everything that they had, like, all the evidence they had wasn't helpful. So the note, like the ransom note, had been, quote, surprisingly literate, end quote, for a ransom note. So police suspected it wasn't the work of any local gangs or organized crime units. And they had sightings of gray cars, like, in the area, but those ended up being discredited because the rental car was green. And then they also couldn't figure out a motive. And so about a week into the investigation, they were stuck. The only evidence they had were those glasses that had been found at the scene, so they took them to an optician to look them over. So if you go to slide 9 with all the glasses, these are pictures of the glasses. And so the optician said, like, the prescription itself was fairly common. It was like an astigmatism prescription that wasn't super strong. But the frames were really distinctive. They were composed of this material called Newport xylenite. No firm in the Midwest manufactured them, and they originated in Brooklyn. And only one Chicago optician sold them. So the police went there next. Only 3 people had bought glasses using that frame and prescription, so they were able to trace the glasses back to Nathan. They caught him because of his glasses.
You idiot.
I was just gonna say that.
Yeah.
That also happened to another murderer, the Trailside Killer in California.
I don't know that
Left his
one.
fucking glasses behind.
Yeah.
And, like, even, I left this part out, I probably should have put it in. Even when they were dumping the body, Nathan later said, like, I heard, like, a tinkling noise. So he heard his glasses fall out of his pocket, but he didn't look for them.
Spectacles, testicles, wallet, watch, my friend.
Also, like, why would you have your glasses along?
He was driving. So he probably wore them to drive and then took them off while they were shoving the body into the pipe. As someone who wears glasses, I know, he should have just put them in the car, but, like...
That's true. I don't wear glasses, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Shelby, you don't know. I went downstairs this morning to find one, like, I just did all my laundry yesterday, and I was trying to find a pair of jeans, and I seriously could not see the difference between colors and shapes without my glasses on this morning. And I was like, why did I even come down here? How did I make it down 2 flights of stairs?
I was just about to say, like, I could barely make it downstairs without my glasses.
I was
even
gonna say,
stairs that I have been on multiple times.
I know, and you know I have a thing with stairs.
Yeah. Yeah, like, I hadn't even thought to question why he had his glasses with him. Because I'm just like, yeah, he has glasses. Obviously, he had his glasses with him.
Shelby, you don't understand.
Just saying.
Well, no, I'm glad you brought it up because that isn't something I thought of. Because to me, it's like, duh, of course he has his glasses. So I am glad you brought that up.
Well, and it depends on, like, what he needed them for and, like...
Yeah.
But also, like, if you have... I mean, I guess you wouldn't necessarily know that you have, like, a rare glasses or whatever.
I don't think he knew
frame,
that necessarily.
But also, like...
Look for your
if
damn
you're
glasses.
gonna murder someone...
If you hear a weird noise while dumping a body, maybe investigate what is making the weird noise.
Also, if you're gonna murder someone, why don't you just, like, every possible thing you don't need on you while dumping the body, you get rid of?
You'd think. I don't know.
Again, have you ever watched Law and Order or CSI? Or Bones? Or Criminal Minds? Like, there's a million shows out there, okay?
Yes.
They just teach you how to murder people.
Yes, in 1924, they had a lot of access to these.
I mean, seriously. Get it together.
So, after linking the glasses to Nathan, they took him into custody and searched his home. This is the area where I cut out the most detail. I tried to make this part as concise as I possibly could. So, in his house, they found a letter addressed to Richard, which is how they linked them together. Under questioning, both men stated that on the night of the murder, they had been out picking up women in Nathan's car. So the police thought this was fishy because the letter they had found hinted at a homosexual relationship, and, you know, bisexuality wasn't a thing in society at the time. So they were like, well, these two are gay. They wouldn't have been picking up girls. And so, in addition to that, Nathan's chauffeur came forward and said that he had been repairing Nathan's car at the time and that he had seen them cleaning out that green car the next day. So they pretty much immediately knew that both of them were lying. They were also able to prove that Nathan's typewriter had been the one used to write the ransom note. So a few of the keys were like not broken, but they didn't work the way they're supposed to. And so the letters looked wrong. And so these like irregular letters were similar between the ransom note and other letters that Nathan had written on a typewriter. I think it was like the T's and the F's looked weird. So they were able to match those up. Mm-hmm. And then there had also been an eyewitness who saw Richard throw the chisel out of Nathan's very distinctive red car. And so this is part of the stuff I took out. So I'm just going to mention it a tiny bit. They weren't, like, read their rights. They weren't arrested. They were just held in jail for, like, several days. Which, like, technically is a constitutional violation. But we just kind of we just kind of blew past that in every analysis I've seen. Exactly. It's 1920s in Chicago. They're lucky they weren't beaten. Care. Like, right. So, after being held in question for several days, it was like 2 or 3 days. I'm over-exaggerating with the several. It was a couple days. Either way. So Richard confessed first, claiming that he had been driving and Nathan had committed the murder, and Nathan confessed to the opposite. So they blamed each other for the actual murder.
Nice.
And there is some, like, sketchy evidence that Nathan was the killer, but most people, including, like, contemporary and nowadays, believe that it was Richard who actually committed the murder. And then both men also took officers around the city to collect various other pieces of evidence because they were not offered attorneys and they were 18 and 19 years old and were stupid. So, yeah. So for the trial,
smart people are so dumb.
They're so dumb. So Richard's family hired an attorney named Clarence Darrow to lead the defense team. So if you can go to the next slide, that's him. So hang on, I need some water. I'm dying.
He looks like he was surprised his picture was being taken.
What?
So
and he's like angry about it.
He looks like that in all of his pictures. He's got some interesting looking pictures. So he's
got
like,
those eyebrows, the angry brows.
He's one of like the most famous attorneys of the 20th century. The other like major case that most people have heard of that he was involved in was the Scopes monkey trial.
Oh.
Yeah, he was the defense attorney for that as well. He was also...
Wait.
Yes.
He was the one against it?
He was defending the teacher who tried to teach evolution in his class. So he was...
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
He was for it.
Yes.
Pro monkeys.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, you're fine.
Just
no, I know. It's
was he pro
or anti-monkey? And so he was a leading member of the ACLU, and he staunchly opposed the death penalty, which becomes a major piece of this case. This is another part that I pared down because Clarence Darrow is a fascinating person, but that's all I'm going to tell you because that's all that's relevant. So Clarence Darrow, his greatest strength were his closing arguments. Like, he was this great speaker, great orator, stuff like that. So he was just a really well-known defense attorney. And so the prosecution was led by Assistant State's Attorney Robert Crowe. So if you go to slide 11, that's him.
Look at that underbite.
Yes. And his little round glasses.
Oh my god, he looks so much like
He looks like Elmer Fudd.
He does look like Elmer Fudd.
I'm getting a picture for you right now.
Okay.
Oh my god.
So there is a lot of Chicago politics bullshit that I left out for Crowe. Just know, it's Chicago in the 20s is super corrupt and he works for the state. It's, so he himself is not corrupt, but he is working within a very corrupt system. That isn't really relevant. I just think it's good for context. And Crowe hated Clarence Darrow for various reasons. And on a personal level, not on a professional level, but on a personal level. I could have known why if I looked into it more, but I didn't. I think it was just that he hated Darrow for being a winning defense attorney, basically.
Fair.
Yeah, which I understand. And so Nathan and Richard were actually finally indicted on June 3rd, which is several days after they were first interviewed, but that's okay. And so...
Is it?
Yeah, it's fine. So...
It's the 20s in Chicago.
Exactly. So it seemed obviously like a slam dunk for the prosecution. They had confessions, eyewitnesses, and physical evidence. Like, pretty difficult to defend that, right? And so everyone assumed that the defense would be not guilty by reason of insanity. And so I do want to go into that just a tiny bit because it's relevant. So this is an affirmative defense that argues that the defendant is not responsible for their actions due to a psychiatric disease that was present at the time of the criminal act. So basically this means because of a, quote, mental disease or defect, which is the legal phrasing for that, you did not know right from wrong, you didn't know what you were doing was illegal, things like that, right? So therefore you should not be culpable because of your mental disease or defect. Again, I'm quoting that language. So as of 2001, I couldn't find a more recent analysis of this, but I don't think it's changed that much. So as of 2001, the insanity defense is used in less than 1% of all court cases, and of those, it's only successful 26% of the time. So it is a very difficult defense to use and to win on.
Well, yeah, because you have to prove that.
Exactly.
Which the event is already over, so...
Yeah. You have to prove that there was an ongoing psychiatric illness that is relevant to the case. Not just that they have one, but that it's relevant to their case and to their decision making. And so those cases that...
And that's like nearly impossible.
It's very, very difficult. And so those that do succeed, they're not just let go. They're generally required to undergo psychiatric treatment in a mental institution. And they're not usually held for a fixed period of time. You know, like with a jail or prison sentence, you're like, you get 25 to life or whatever. With a psych hold like this, you're held until your care team decides that you are no longer a threat. So you could get out in 6 weeks. You could never get out. It just depends on how your illness is progressing and how you are responding to treatment and things like that. So, and then I don't know if this is still the case, but at the time of the Leopold and Loeb trial, Illinois law required insanity defenses to be heard by a jury. And so the other option in trials normally is a bench trial, and that is where the defendant waives their right to a jury and just has a judge make a decision as to their guilt. A lot of people do this because they are in a, like they might be a more well-known case, or they think that the nature of the case would make juries like extremely prejudiced against them in a way that they don't think they can work around, right? Mm-hmm. So it does happen fairly often, but at the time the law was insanity cases have to be heard by a jury. Like I said, I don't know if that's still how it is, but that was how it was in 1924.
Okay.
So, yeah, slammed up for prosecution. Everybody thought they were going to use insanity as a defense. Instead, Darrow shocked everyone by having Nathan and Richard enter pleas of guilty on July 21st, 1924. So he had decided, probably correctly, that a jury trial would almost certainly end in a death penalty. And again, he's really against the death penalty. And so entering a guilty plea moves the trial straight to the sentencing phase, and the judge is the one who decides the sentence. And so he hoped to convince the judge to impose sentences of life in prison rather than a death penalty. Excuse me. Great timing on that burp there.
Like a mic drop.
And so this...
But a gut drop.
Yeah.
I'll work on it. I'll work.
Yes, okay. So this required the judge... so this was Judge John R. Caverly, to decide to allow the defense to present mitigating evidence during the sentencing hearing. So this happens all the time. Basically, evidence is presented at the sentencing hearing in an attempt to get a lesser sentence for the guilty party. So it could be like character witnesses, medical testimony, stuff like that. They're basically trying to say, I have all this evidence showing that the person on trial doesn't deserve a really harsh sentence. Basically.
So it's basically like, yes, they did it. Yes, it was wrong, but here's why they shouldn't die for it.
Yes, basically. And so the prosecution in these kind of hearings, they're allowed to refute that mitigating evidence and present their own evidence to try to get their harsher sentence. So like, it's still kind of a trial. Like, it's not a trial because we already have an answer, right? We already know that they are pleading guilty.
Yeah,
but
there's already a verdict.
Yeah, there's already a verdict. But it's going to proceed similarly to the trial because we're still calling witnesses, we're still doing cross-examinations, still doing things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so Judge Caverly did grant this request to present mitigating evidence, so the case moved straight to sentencing hearings. It's only one hearing, but it was like a month long. The hearing began on August 4th, 1924. And so I do want to take a step back here and discuss the media frenzy surrounding this case. So if you can go to slide 12, these are some newspaper articles, headlines more specifically, talking about the case. And so this was a crime of the century. I feel like we've had a lot of those. But it...
Yeah, there's a crime of the century like every 5 years.
Yeah, and so this was the one...
Also, this is America, so we have a crime of the century like every day.
Yeah, so this was for sure...
At least nowadays.
Yeah, this was... I'm trying to think. This is similar to like Casey Anthony or JonBenet Ramsey, that kind of, or Madeleine McCann. It is similar to that level of interest, right? And so the news and society at the time had a lot to say about it, much like how it is now. So Darrow and Crow both like argued their case in the papers, which was a novel concept at the time that had never really been done before. Which like nowadays, a lot of the time, the prosecution and defense attorneys will both say to the press, like, we think it'll go this way because of X, Y, and Z, or they'll say, my client isn't guilty because of X, like they're gonna talk to the papers. That wasn't a thing at the time. There was also, I kept all this out because it was too much. There was this big whole debate on whether or not I keep saying trial, whether the sentencing hearing would be broadcast on the radio, which had never been done before. They eventually decided not to do that, but it took a while for them to decide not to do that. It was very dramatic. And so, like, on top of all of this, people didn't want to accept that, they killed him for the hell of it and because they thought they were above the law. Like, they didn't want to accept that. And so they looked for alternative reasons for Nathan and Richard to, like, think the way that they did. And so I have some fascinating reasons here that are very 1920s. So these reasons included atheism and the hedonistic atmosphere of the 1920s. And so this next part is a quote from the Paris Review. This atmosphere was described in newspapers at the time as the jazz life, a generational rot that gave young men an appetite for gin, heavy petting, and, regrettably, homicide. So they blamed...
They're smoking those jazz
regrettable.
cigarettes.
Yes.
That regrettable habit of homicide.
Yes. I just thought that was... And, like, there was a part...
Oh my God.
There was a section in the book that I've been using as a reference that basically said, I couldn't find it, again, when I was, like, because I didn't reread the whole book. Like, I was skipping through looking for things to use. And, I remember there was this one section that was basically just, like, kids these days. And I wanted to I wanted to quote that here because, like, that's shit that we say now, but I couldn't find it again.
It's funny because we still are like this and we still don't get sociology.
No.
People will look back on our times and be like, wow, these backwards fucks, they're so stupid.
Like...
And we're here like, wow, can you believe that they think that having a jazz life
Exactly.
Whatever.
So just
my dad is still like millennials and their
that's
essential
literally what
oils.
it was. It's like how people blame millennials for everything. They were blaming jazz on everything. Like, for everything.
It's the essential oils and the yoga, don't you know?
Yeah.
Listen, we didn't ruin the economy, so you can suck my... Sorry. I'm usually not that vulgar. That was pretty gross. Sorry.
That's okay. Some other reasons. Some people blamed an erosion of Jewish values. I do want to note that neither Richard nor Nathan were practicing Jews, and their family had either converted to another religion or just weren't practicing. So, like, this isn't valid.
Okay.
And then this is a quote from the Paris Review. Hundreds of thousands of rich Jews who don't know what to do with their money and who let their children grow up without any feeling of Jewish responsibilities were to blame, according to a, quote, Jewish spokesman quoted in the Chicago Daily Tribune. That sounds kind of anti-Semitic to me. I don't know about y'all, but...
Tiny bit.
Yeah.
I'm not Jewish, but that sounds a little not good.
Yeah. One thing they didn't blame it on was on them being gay because, and we're going to get into this later, they thought that being gay was too disgusting to print in the newspapers. So they never actually said that. They just said that the men were, like, sexually perverse right? Because that was the acceptable way to discuss that at the time. I did just want to bring that up because...
These bachelors, in quotes.
Yeah! The final reason is phrenology. So if you go to the next slide...
Oh my god.
This is...
yes.
I know! This is Nathan Leopold's phrenology chart. And so...
Destructive.
Sensuous lips.
Yes! Yes. And so...
instinct.
And so...
Sex weaker than Loeb.
Yes. I couldn't find Richards. I tried. I couldn't find Richards. So, this is again...
Dynamic personality.
Yes.
In his ear. I'm dead.
You're fine. Okay, so this is a quote...
Aggressiveness at the tip of his nose.
Yes, this is a quote from the Paris Review. Then there were the phrenologists and psychologists who volunteered physiological readings of the boys. Leopold's beefy lips suggested gross desires. Loeb's narrow lips suggested he lacked willpower. Which again is hysterical, because Richard was the dominant one in this relationship, so no, but whatever. And so...
His beefy lips.
Yes.
God, please never say that again.
I know!
Lacks reason, moral, and benevolent power.
Because of his hairline.
Because of his hairline.
So...
Destructive instinct is that weird circle above his ear.
Okay,
God.
so all of this...
That's the speech center of the brain, but okay.
All of this media shit was present when testimony began. So I just wanted to present this, like, just for context. And because, like, this was, like, the most talked about event, basically, in 1924. At least in Chicago. So, I'm sure it was more widespread than just in Chicago, but in Chicago, this is, like, the only thing people talked about for the entire rest of 1924. And so, I did just want to bring it up because I didn't want to ignore that it was a huge media frenzy. So, yeah, all this was present when testimony began. So if you can go to the next slide, this is just photos of them at the trial. Or I keep saying trial, at the hearing. And so this next part is a quote from...
Is that... Wait.
What?
Okay, in the second picture,
yes.
Behind...
That's Richard in the back.
What's his face? Richard. Is that... Which president does that look like?
He does look like a president. Lyndon Johnson?
On the left. Yes!
Yeah.
It's Lyndon Johnson.
That does look like Lyndon Johnson.
We got Lindy on the left, everybody!
That does look
Is
like
this
Lyndon
the
Johnson.
dude who kind of looks like the Crypt Keeper here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Really, really tired.
The one
Like-
with worse dark circles than I have.
Right?
Might
Like,
actually have
sir,
just been punched in the face.
please get some concealer up in
Yeah.
here.
And then that other man is like totally jamming to something
Yeah.
in his head.
I'm
He's
pretty
feeling
sure
it.
he's high.
I'm really glad I included these pictures. I wasn't expecting this level of conversation.
Also, is that a woman in the back in the first picture with her tongue out?
Maybe? I can't see it.
See, look.
Possibly. I don't know.
Looks like her tongue's out.
Okay.
I will dissect any photo.
No, I know. You're fine. No,
so
I
much.
like it. You're fine. Okay. So, we are going to talk about testimony presented by the defense now. So, this is a quote from that Smithsonian article, which, again, is a shorter version of that book. And so, this is kind of long. Just stick with me. So, William Allinson White, the president of the American oh my god, hang on. I can't talk right now. Okay, I'm just gonna start that over. William Allinson White, the president of the American Psychiatric Association, I can't say psychiatric today, Jesus, told the court that both Leopold and Loeb had experienced trauma at an early age at the hands of their governesses. Loeb had grown up under a disciplinary regimen so exacting that, in order to escape punishment, he had had no other recourse but to lie to his governess, and so, in White's account at least, he had been set on a path of criminality. He considered himself the master criminal mind of the century, White testified, controlling a large band of criminals whom he directed. Even at times, he thought of himself as being so sick as to be confined to bed, but so brilliant and capable of mind that the underworld came to him and sought his advice and asked for his direction. Leopold had also been traumatized, having been sexually intimate with his governess at an early age. Other psychiatrists William Healy, the author of The Individual Delinquent, and Bernard, I think it's Gleck, professor of psychiatry at the New York Postgraduate School and Hospital, confirmed that both boys possessed a vivid fantasy life. Leopold pictured himself as a strong and powerful slave favored by his sovereign to settle disputes in single-handed combat. Each fantasy interlocked with the other. Loeb, in translating his fantasy of being a criminal mastermind into reality, required an audience for his misdeeds and gladly recruited Leopold as a willing participant. Leopold needed to play the role of the slave to a powerful sovereign, and who, other than Loeb, was able to serve as Leopold's king. So we're done. This is just a very short summary of the defense testimony by the psychiatrist. Amazing! So they're basically saying, and like I left it out earlier because we were going to talk about it here. So both of them had, I guess now we would think of it as maladaptive daydreaming maybe. They both had these like very vivid fantasies where they pictured themselves in these different scenarios, and they both like fit into each other's, which is why they were like so close with each other. Does that make sense?
It's like a, what's it called?
Folie à deux.
Menage a trois.
Folie à deux? Menage a trois is a threesome.
Folie à deux, that's what I meant.
I was gonna say the folie à deux.
Menage a
Listen,
trois.
I don't speak French.
Menage a trois is a threesome.
Trois means three.
I don't speak French.
Neither do I.
I don't know if I've made that clear. I don't know any French. I don't know what any of it means.
I just know that menage a trois means threesome.
Well, I found that out today.
No, okay.
Oh,
So,
okay.
I don't know if they... So, like, I did look into whether or not this was a case of folie à deux. I couldn't find, like, an actual, like, professional person who said this was folie à deux. It was just people speculating on the internet, so I don't feel comfortable saying that this was a case of folie à deux, but, like, it may have
That's
been.
probably like the Anne Perry
Speculation.
murder. It could have been.
Yeah.
but
I don't
It's
know.
like-
Murder?
Anne Perry, the girl
Oh, yeah.
who the like author
Or
who
like the Slender
murdered.
Man murder.
Yeah, where
Yeah,
it's like
Or
yeah.
attempted
it
murder.
could have been, but it could also just be that one person has like a slightly stronger personality, but they're both a little like
Off.
not right.
Yeah, I think it's more likely that it's that, because they didn't have a shared delusion other than that they were both superior to other people, and I don't think that's necessarily a delusion. Like in a psychiatric sense, I don't think that is a delusion.
Yeah.
It could be. I don't think that the field considers that to be one, at least from what I remember.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't
At least
think so.
not to the point of like murder. And
Yeah,
stuff.
not to this level, because that's what folie à deux. It's the shared madness of two, and it's usually a shared delusion. We didn't have that here, so I don't think.
And it's
folie à
usually
deux.
I don't know what
Yeah.
I was gonna say there. So.
I don't know. So anyway, the defense psychiatrists are saying these two are cuckoo bananas. Give them life in prison, basically. So the prosecution also had prominent psychiatrists testify for them. And so this is a continuation of that quote from the Smithsonian Mag. So Crow had also recruited prominent psychiatrists for the prosecution. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm burping again. Oh my God. I'm just dying today. Okay.
Apparently. You good?
I'm good. So these psychiatrists included Hugh Patrick, president of the American Neurological Association, William Crone and Harold Singer, authors of Insanity and the Law, a treatise on forensic psychiatry, and Archibald Church, professor of mental diseases and medical jurisprudence at Northwestern University. I could say jurisprudence, but I'm stumbling on psychiatry today. Like, what the fuck? Okay.
It's fine.
It's fine. All four testified that neither Leopold nor Loeb displayed any sign of mental derangement, which is a quote. They had examined both prisoners in the office of the state's attorney shortly after their arrest. There was no defect of vision, Crone testified, no defect of hearing, no evidence of any defect of any of the sense paths or sense activities. There was no defect of the nerves leading from the brain as evidenced by gait, station, or tremors. So we're going to do an observation here. And a lot of this is from that Smithsonian Mag article. So, in case you couldn't tell, each set of psychiatrists, one for the state, the other for defense, they contradicted each other, right? Because defense saying they're cuckoo bananas, prosecution saying, no, they're perfectly sane, right? Few observers at the time noticed that each side spoke for different branches of psychiatry and were therefore separately justified in reaching those separate verdicts. So the expert witnesses for the state, who were all neurologists, had found no evidence that any organic trauma or infection might have damaged either the cerebral cortex or the central nervous system of the defendants. The conclusion reached by the psychiatrist for the prosecution was, therefore, a correct one. There was no mental disease. The psychiatrist for the defense could assert with equal justification that, according to their understanding of psychiatry, an understanding informed by psychoanalysis, the defendants had suffered mental trauma during childhood that had damaged each boy's ability to function competently. The result was compensatory fantasies that had led directly to the murder. Most commentators at the time were oblivious to the knowledge gulf that separated neurology from psychoanalytic psychology. The expert witnesses all claimed to be psychiatrists, and it was, everyone agreed, a dark day for psychiatry when leading representatives of the profession could stand up in court and contradict each other. And this led to a very sound condemnation of psychiatry as a field, because they didn't, no one at the time, because psychiatry and psychology were still very new fields in 1924, no one really knew or understood that these two sides were coming from completely different areas of psychiatry, and under their own understanding of psychiatry, they were both right. They just came to completely different conclusions. So it was just I just wanted to bring that up because I just thought it was interesting. And because this case it wasn't the first, obviously, to introduce psychiatric evidence, but it's one of the most, not controversial necessarily, but it's one of those ones where there's a very stark difference in the findings between the different psychiatrists. And I just think it's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all of this testimony took 32 days to give because there was a lot of cross-examining and bickering and other such nonsense. So this next part is a quote from the Paris Review. In his closing argument, Darrow asked the judge to consider that wealth has its misfortunes. Leopold and Loeb, in his view, were victims of affluence. Given every advantage and opportunity, the boys suffered a kind of agoraphobic reaction to their own privilege. Darrow's argument is an early iteration of the so-called affluenza disease made famous in the case of 20-year-old Ethan Couch, who mowed down 4 people along a Texas road in 2013. As ludicrous as Darrow's defense was then, and still is, it underscores the distinguishing feature in the Leopold and Loeb case and in many other criminal cases that have transfixed the country: class. So Darrow's whole thing was they're rich and don't know any better, similar to Ethan Couch. So, there's that. Yeah. He also kept referring to Leopold and Loeb as boys, which is fair. Okay. The age of majority at the time was 21, so they were technically underage at the time.
I just rolled my eyes so hard.
I know. I'm not defending it. I'm just explaining it. And in similar cases where the defendants were different classes or races, those defendants were probably referred to as men instead of boys, right? So.
I'm sure they were.
Yeah, because that still happens now. And, yeah. And so, on September 10th, 1924, Judge Caverly read his verdict. He gave no weight to the guilty plea, which, this is a quote from the Smithsonian Mag article. Normally, a guilty plea could mitigate punishment if it saved the prosecution the time and trouble of demonstrating culpability, but that had not been the case on this occasion, so he didn't take that into account. He also didn't consider the psychiatric evidence. The defendants, Caverly stated, quote, have been shown in essential respects to be abnormal. The careful analysis made of the life history of the defendants and of their present mental, emotional, and ethical condition has been of extreme interest. And yet, the court feels strongly that similar analyses made of other persons accused of crime would probably reveal similar or different abnormalities. For this reason, the court is satisfied that his judgment in the present case cannot be affected thereby. Basically, he's saying, yeah, they're cuckoo, but everyone in their situation would be cuckoo, so that doesn't matter. And he wasn't swayed by any psychiatric testimony at all. And so the thing that ended up saving them was their age. Nathan had been 19 and Richard had been 18 at the time of the murder, and Caverly felt that the death penalty should not be imposed on someone who had not come of age, because at the time the age of majority was 21. And so instead, they were both sentenced to life in prison. Crow was absolutely fucking furious because he had been pushing for the death penalty. Yeah. He issued a statement that evening that read, quote, Leopold and Loeb had the reputation of being immoral degenerates of the worst type. The evidence, this part, whatever. The evidence shows that both defendants are atheists and followers of the Nietzschean doctrines, that they are above the law, both the law of God and the law of man. It is unfortunate for the welfare of the community that they were not sentenced to death. So Crow had very strong opinions on the outcome of this case.
Apparently.
Yeah. So yeah, they were both sentenced to life in prison. And so now we're going to talk about aftermath kind of stuff. So if you can go to the last slide, this is their like booking photos. So they were initially both sent to Joliet prison, where they were kept apart as much as possible. And then they both ended up being transferred to Stateville Penitentiary, although they were transferred like at different times. But they were both in the same prison for basically the entire time they were in prison, which I find interesting. And so on January 28th, 1936, Richard Loeb was attacked by a fellow inmate named James Day. And he was attacked with a straight razor in a shower room, and he ended up dying of his injuries. And so Day claimed that Richard had assaulted him, but there was like no evidence for that. It was suggested that Richard had propositioned Day and that had caused the attack. There wasn't evidence of that either. Some actually claim that Day had propositioned Richard and attacked him after he refused. Regardless, Day was found not guilty of Richard Loeb's murder, and I am pretty sure it was because he used the gay panic defense. Yeah, so I couldn't find an actual report that stated outright why he was acquitted, but that seems to be the leading theory. And so in case people don't know, or if they don't have like a concrete definition, the gay panic defense is a legal strategy in which a defendant claims that they acted in a state of violent temporary insanity, committing assault or murder because of unwanted same-sex sexual advances. So this doctrine is actually still legal in several states. It is not legal in Illinois anymore because, actually, my writing professor wrote the legislation that banned it. So it's not legal in several states, but it is still legal in several other states. It's basically someone's homophobic and thinks that someone of their same sex is coming onto them, so they kill them. It's awful. But yeah, so I'm pretty sure that was why he was acquitted of Richard's murder. And so after Richard's murder, I mean, Nathan just kind of continued his life in prison. He was a model prisoner and made many significant contributions to improving conditions at the prison. He was paroled in March 1958 after serving 33 years. And he immediately accepted a position as a medical tech at a hospital in Puerto Rico. He got married in 1961. His wife was the widow of a Baltimore physician. And he did return to Chicago fairly often. And then he ended up dying of a diabetes-related heart attack on August 29th, 1971 at the age of 66. So that's it for like the actual case. There are a couple of other factors that I want to talk about. First one, I want to talk about the role of homosexuality in this case. So Leopold and Loeb did both admit to the press that they were in a homosexual relationship with each other. So I am not speculating as to their relationship. They both said, yes, we are in a relationship with each other. So this is not me looking back and being like, oh, they were probably gay. Like, we know for a fact they were in a sexual relationship with each other. And so we know that they had sex with each other multiple times and that Nathan was both attracted to and in love with Richard. We're less clear on Richard's perspective of the relationship, but he was more than willing to have sex with Nathan. However, he may have used that relationship against Nathan. It's speculated that Richard proposed the murder as part of a contract. If Nathan participates in the murder, Richard will continue to have sex with him. Or they'll have sex more often. I saw both explanations. I don't know if this is true, but it's quoted in so many sources. But I don't know if that's true or not. It might just be like a rumor or something that cropped up later. And so, you know, it's the 1920s. Homosexuality was seen as a perversion and it wasn't understood. And then on top of this, historians as a whole tend to not acknowledge homosexuality unless it is explicitly stated somewhere. And so there are a lot of like historical sources that contextually hint that certain historical figures were gay, but because it's subtext, historians ignore it. A lot of this is because...
It's so annoying.
Yeah, a lot of this is because most historians are straight men, and they don't know of those secret ways that someone in the LGBTQ plus community would recognize as someone stating that they are in fact gay. right? Like, they're going to read something and just read it because they're a straight white dude. But then somebody who is gay would read it and be like, oh, no, they're full on saying that they're gay. They just can't explicitly state it because they're going to get arrested.
One thing, I don't even remember the two ladies' names, but it's like in historical things, it's like these two ladies like ran away together, lived together, and like had a cat named Sappho. And everyone's they like, they were just roommates.
They were just roommates.
For some buddies.
Yeah.
And I'm like, they had a cat named Sappho. They were lesbians. Okay. Like, every other thing in the thing, in the, like, history points to it. Not even just the cat. It's like...
Yeah.
But...
not even just the cat.
The cat. The smoking gun of evil lesbians.
But I don't know why. It's just that, like, that's the last bullet point in, like, their life of, like... all the stuff that they listed out, and for some reason that's the one that I remember, and I'm just like,
I mean, that's obviously as good of a hint as any.
I'm like,
you know? Yeah.
But it's fine.
Yeah, and then on top of that, people are just homophobic, so they don't want to think that people in the past were gay.
What? Yeah, there's that.
And so the way that both contemporary and modern sources and analysis of this case, how they treat the possible homosexuality of Leopold and Loeb is both insulting and unhelpful. As I mentioned earlier, contemporary sources didn't think homosexuality was printable. It was too disgusting to mention outright, so they just said that the men suffered from sexual irregularities, and they didn't elaborate any further. And then modern sources tend to do one of the following. They dance around it completely by saying, oh, they were just really good friends. They acknowledge it, but they don't examine their relationship within its context. So they say, yeah, they were gay and possibly in a romantic relationship, but we're going to ignore that while we're analyzing them as people. Or they use it as a salacious detail, like, they were gay! How scandalous! Like, something like that, which none of those are helpful analyses of these two people. And so we also have to keep in mind that a gay relationship in the 1920s looks extremely different to a gay relationship in the 2020s. It would have been much more secretive, if not completely a secret, and more than likely would not have been explicitly mentioned in letters or conversations, unless they knew that no one else was going to learn of this fact. People in a gay relationship would not have been able to easily live as gay, and more than likely were forced to be closeted. This is if a person is even, like, they're ever even able to act on their sexuality instead of being stuck in a straight relationship, because that was what they were supposed to do. And so because of this horrible handling and the different cultural contexts, it is very difficult to give an accurate analysis of the relationship between the two men. So them being in a mutual romantic relationship is really important to their dynamic, but because the sources at the time, it's hard to know if that's even the case, or if they were in, like, a friends with benefits situation, at least for Richard. And, like, we're pretty sure that Nathan only participated in these crimes to please Richard and or to continue their relationship, but that's never really analyzed. Because if this is truly the case, this is a very toxic and potentially abusive romantic relationship, and I think that that factors into this situation quite strongly. I think, at least. This whole thing just completely delegitimizes and buries their sexualities, but that's like a footnote to the footnote.
Yes.
I just think we are doing a disservice to, not the truth necessarily, but that by ignoring it, we're not learning anything, right? Mm-hmm. And why are we discussing these cases if not to learn? And then again, like, yeah, and like, none of this is to say they committed the crime because they were gay. I'm not even remotely saying that. Oh, for sure. No.
Yeah.
I am simply saying the dynamics of their relationship are very important to the case. And ignoring that does nothing to further our understanding. Even if it wasn't,
like, regardless of whether it's a romantic relationship or not, whenever two people commit a crime together, there is some sort of dynamic to their relationship.
Exactly.
And so if you add that layer of romantic or sexual relationship on top of it, it has an effect on their relationship as a whole and as their relationship as criminals.
Exactly.
Not that it's not that their sexuality factors into their criminality. No. It's that their sexuality factors into
their relationship.
And their relationship factors into.
Exactly. And like I tried to find more I don't want to say, like, I wasn't trying to find a concrete source that said, yes, they were gay, because that doesn't exist, and I knew that already. But, like,
yes,
the way that it's handled, it's just so weird. I should have mentioned this as well. So, like, I found some sources that were just, like, blogs. They weren't by any kind of professional person at all, who they called them boyfriends, which I don't think is an accurate word to use, personally.
Yeah.
And then they also were just like, oh, these, like, they, like, romanticize their relationship, which I also don't think is accurate, because to me, it seems like an abusive, toxic relationship, right? Mm-hmm. And so, like, when it is
at the end of the day, we're never going to know what their actual relationship was, so to paint it in any certain light is...
Yeah, but, like, when it is mentioned, it's not handled well, because it's viewed as simply a positive, and they don't actually analyze the nitty-gritty of their actual dynamic. They're just like, oh, they're gay. It's like I said, oh, they're gay, and then they move on. And it's just not handled well by any source that I saw, and it kind of pissed me off.
Oh, for sure.
So, and then the last thing I want to talk about is why we still talk about this case, because it's almost 100 years old. And, I mean, it's a fairly simple case. Two arrogant assholes killed a kid because they thought they could get away with it. Like, that shit has happened before and since then, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so the rest of this that I'm going to be quoting is from that Paris Review article, and it summed it up very, very well. So perhaps the reason why the Leopold and Loeb case remains intriguing is because it subverts our expectations about the psychological and moral health that money is presumed to, is it vouchsafe? Right?
What?
Vouchsafe, one word. Is that how you say that?
Sure.
Okay.
I don't actually know that one.
I think it means protect. Let's just say protect.
Okay.
In the America of 1924, as in the America of 2018, when this article was written, very rich people are not often publicly associated with gruesome murders. A rich person who has everything to lose is imagined to dabble in cleaner, white-collar crimes, if they're criminals at all. Poor people who have nothing to lose are imagined to be guilty of anything. In the end, this is probably the case's evergreen legacy. Had Leopold and Loeb been two poor black men, it's unlikely we'd know their names today, and certainly unlikely they'd be the subjects of books and films, because they are. They would have been sentenced to death and hanged. Robert Crowe, the prosecuting attorney, suggested as much during his closing argument. And so this is his closing argument. Take away their money, and what happens? The same thing that has happened to all the other men who have been tried in this building who had no money. Clarence Darrow once said that a poor man on trial here was disposed of in 15 minutes, but if he was rich and committed the same crime and he got a good lawyer, his trial would last 21 days. Well, they got 3 lawyers, and it has lasted just a little bit longer. As capitalism reveals itself to be ever more dysfunctional, the Leopold and Loeb case reemerges as a parable of both the limits and miracles of wealth. The irony is that even as the killers rejected any god or moral code, their birthright was a class system that already presumed their innocence and their salvation. As ridiculous as the affluenza defense is as a legal argument, it does crystallize at least one truth that has remained central to our national mythology. Money is a sickness in America, and it kills. And that is all I have.
Snaps.
And, like, I agree with this. Like, I think that is why we still talk about this case. Because it is a very...
It definitely factors into it.
Yeah.
If nothing else.
Yeah. So... And I just liked that quote. It's very long. It's a very good quote. So, thoughts? Questions? I know we went through this kind of...
Do stupid crimes. Yeah. Basically...
Don't think that you are so smart that you won't get caught. Because, like, the police are dumb.
Thank you.
But you might be dumber. You never know.
Also, there's just more of them.
Yeah, there's more of them.
So someone in there might be smart.
Maybe. Hopefully.
Maybe 1 or 2.
Yeah. Or you're just an idiot who dropped your 3 in a million glasses.
Right? God, you fucking idiot.
Oh, my God. Okay, so, yeah, that was, I mean, we're still at an hour and 40 minutes. That is so much less than I could have included.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, y'all, she would have just
I would have
read
read
her
the
novelization
entire
of the
I
situation
would have read them.
had she been given the
I
chance.
would have read them the book. I would have read them for the thrill of it. Like, that would have been great, but...
She would have wrote her fan fiction,
Yes.
whipped that out.
It's kind of like Hannah with her Chernobyl fanfiction.
Yes.
Listen, my fan fiction is real, and you can find it on our Instagram.
Yeah, I do recommend that book if people are interested. It goes into a whole lot of detail, and I think it's fascinating. But I gave you the highlights here, so...
Yes.
Okay, that is all I have, and we still have 2 more episodes to record. So our ending is that we have no ending. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Peace out. Thanks for listening to The Triad. Our music is by Scott Buckley. Our audio is recorded by our sound engineers, Craig Bott and Audrey Credo.
If you like the show, please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, YouTube, and Tumblr as The Triad Podcast.
We're also on Patreon as The Triad. Currently, all Patreon funds will go towards the cost of hosting the show. Each tier has its own rewards, but every patron receives our undying gratitude. Do you have comments, questions, or stories? Email us at thetriadpod@gmail.com. And thank you again for listening to The Triad, where we're spooky but sensitive.